Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mini Books Podcast with your host Gloria and Rogan, and today we are excited to dive into Special Book with you. We picked this one because it has really important lessons to share and we can't wait to talk about them. So let's get started.
All right, so we're diving into The Rational Male, huh? It should be interesting. This book's got everyone talking, and it's all about, well, prying open the hidden mechanics of relationships between men and women. Let's break it down.
Yeah, it's definitely sparked some debate. Rollo Tomassi, the guy who wrote it, he doesn't hold back. He basically says most of what we think we know about dating and relationships, totally off base.
Right from the start, he throws this curveball. Says most relationship advice is built on, like, shaky ground. Like, men and women are playing by completely different rules without even realizing it.
He calls it the red pill philosophy, right? Tomassi's whole thing is society's been feeding us this blue pill story, this whole romantic love conquers all thing. But he says that's not how it actually works, not really.
So what's this red pill alternative then? What's the difference between these rule books he's talking about?
Okay, so he says men were conditioned for commitment. Makes sense, right? It's kind of how we're wired. But Tomassi says women, it's different. They're wired for what he calls hypergamy, driven by both, biology and how society shapes us.
Hypergamy. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there's a word that needs some explaining. It's not just about women wanting a partner who's, like, better than them, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's a little more complicated than that. Think of it more like this drive, this innate drive to not just marry up, but to constantly be looking for the absolute best mate out there. And what defines best? Well, that can change too. It can be influenced by what stage of life she's in, her goals, even just where she's at in her own personal journey. He talks about this a lot, especially in the section about what he calls proactive cheating.
Proactive cheating. Okay, now that's a chapter title that makes you stop and think. Sounds kind of scandalous, but he's not actually talking about, like, sneaking around behind someone's back, is he?
Not exactly. What he's getting at is this biological urge women can have to seek out what Tomassi calls good genes, even if it's, just for having kids.
So he's saying there's this, like, biological drive to find the most, the most viable partner, at least for procreation.
Exactly. And he even goes as far as to say that women might be drawn to different types of partners with different qualities at different points in their lives. Like early on, it might be all about those good genes, those attractive qualities. But once they're thinking about starting a family, those priorities might shift towards what he calls good dad qualities. Someone who's reliable, stable.
Whoa. So you're saying a woman might be subconsciously looking for different things in a partner at different times. Like she's playing, different games with different rules depending on where she's at in life.
In a way, yeah. And that's where he brings in this thing he calls plate theory. Imagine a guy, right, spinning plates, trying to keep them all going at once.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Go on.
Tomassi says that by dating multiple women, men can actually flip the script. It creates this aura of value and abundance around them, which he says taps into this whole hypergamous thing we were talking about.
Hold on. Isn't that a little, manipulative? Like saying guys should be juggling hearts just to get what they want?
I can see why you'd say that. It's definitely a controversial idea. But Tomassi's point is that these dynamics, they're already in play, even if we're not aware of them. He's saying that understanding them can help men navigate relationships, not necessarily to be manipulative, but with more awareness, maybe even with more success.
Okay, so we're talking subconscious desires, hidden rules, and guys spinning plates. This is getting kind of wild. But he doesn't stop there. Tomassi goes even further, right? This whole other level, this thing he calls the feminine imperative at play in society.
Yeah, this is where some people, they check out. They just can't with Tomassi. He's basically saying there's this set of rules, unspoken rules, and it often benefits women. Shapes everything. Social norms, what we expect in relationships, everything.
Like a whole system, a matrix we're all just stuck in. What's that look like, this feminine imperative in action? Give me an example.
Well, think about it. Guys are still expected to be providers, right? Even though, more and more women are crushing it in their careers these days. Or, how about the chivalry? Still seems like it's a one-way street a lot of the time. Guys expected to pay for dates, that kind of thing. And Tomassi even goes there with looks. Says society downplays how important they are for men, but women, different standard, calls it the myth of male looks.
It's funny, right? It's like those things we've all heard. He's got a great personality, or he just needs to be taller than me in heels. Suddenly you're like, wait a minute. Those little sayings, they're part of this whole imperative thing.
That's what he'd say. It's everywhere. We pick it up as kids, from movies, TV shows, even advertising. It gets so deep we don't even realize it's shaping what we think is normal in relationships.
So we're all playing by these rules, men and women, often without even knowing it. But inside all that, within those unspoken rules, Tomassi says women have developed some, let's say, interesting strategies.
Interesting is one way to put it. He calls them dread games. Says that, consciously or not, women use these tactics to keep a sense of control in a relationship.
Dread games. Okay,
Yeah.
now that sounds intense. Lay it on me. What are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Think about a time you were walking on eggshells with a partner, right? Terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing. Or maybe you felt like you were constantly trying to prove yourself, always chasing their approval. Could be signs of these dread games in action.
Man, have I been there. It's exhausting. Like you never know what to do, never know if you're doing enough.
That's part of it, Tomassi would argue. He says these games, they tap into a man's fear of loss, his desire for approval, makes him more likely to, well, play along.
So let me get this straight. We're going with Tomassi's logic here, right? Men, wired for commitment, women, driven by hypergamy. And on top of all that, we're all running around inside this feminine imperative following rules no one told us about. Kind of a bleak picture of relationships, isn't it? Are we all just doomed to completely misunderstand each other? So we're like knee-deep in this red pill world, right? But before we all swear off relationships forever, let's talk about what Tomassi actually wants guys to do with all this. He's not just going to leave us wandering around in the Matrix, is he? No, not really. He gets pretty specific about what he thinks men should do, lays out these iron rules for navigating relationships.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. If you're enjoying this podcast, then don't forget to check out our official YouTube channel, Mini Books Podcast, and subscribe for more great podcasts like this one.
It's his, playbook for men, right? Yeah. Iron rules, huh? Always get a little nervous when something's ironclad, but okay, I'm listening. What are some of these rules, and how do they connect back to everything we've been talking about? Give me the rundown.
Okay, here's one that always gets people fired up. Iron Rule 2. Never let a woman control the birth. Now, before you freak out, he's not saying men should be calling all the shots with family planning. It's more about, men being active participants, understanding what's on the table, making their own voices heard.
Okay, so it's less about control and more about, shared responsibility, being on the same page with those big decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to that feminine imperative idea. Tomassi's saying that by being proactive, men can make sure their needs and wants are part of the equation, especially in a system that, he argues, often prioritizes women's choices.
Gotcha. All right, so that's Iron Rule 2. Hit me with another.
How about this Iron Rule 8? Always let a woman figure out why she won't sleep with you.
Whoa, okay. That one seems a little out there. Explain yourself.
Oh, no, right? It sounds weird, but think about it. Tomassi's saying don't overthink it, don't try to fix it, just respect her decision, her reasons. They're her own.
So, less analyzing, more accepting boundaries. It's about her being in control of her own choices, her own body.
Exactly. Respecting her autonomy. And, maybe even more important, it tells men to own their actions, own their choices, without getting hung up on trying to control how someone else is feeling.
There's a theme here, isn't there? Taking responsibility, understanding your own values, setting boundaries. It's like Tomassi wants men to break out of those predefined roles he says society puts on them.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting about the rational male. Even if you don't buy all of it, he makes you think, makes you question. And maybe that's what some people need to look at their relationships in a new light.
It's like he's handing you a new pair of glasses, right? Try these on, see how your relationships look now.
Totally. And that's what makes it a great tool. Even if you don't agree with every single thing, it gets you talking, questioning those assumptions. And at the end of the day, it's about figuring out what works for you in your own life, in your relationships.
So we went deep down the rabbit hole with the rational male, hypergamy, Clayt theory, dread games, the whole feminine imperative, and some of it, definitely out there. But you got to admit, there's a certain logic to it. At least he makes you think, makes you question. Yeah. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to shake things up and get a fresh perspective.
Yeah, he's not afraid of a little controversy, that's for sure. But even with the stuff that seems a little extreme, he's pointing to some real things. How we are, the power dynamics in relationships, all the ways society shapes how we act.
And that's what these deep dives are for. We give you the info, different sides, the key takeaways. Now it's up to you to figure out what sits right, what challenges your own thinking, how you can actually use it in your own life, your own relationships.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's not telling you what to think. It's giving you the tools to understand, to navigate this whole crazy world of relationships with a little more, I don't know, awareness. Maybe even a little more confidence. Who knows? You might even see those dread games coming from a mile away now.
All right, we're listening. It's your turn. What do you think about the rational male? Have you experienced any of this stuff in your own relationships? We want to hear about it. Hit us up on social media. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, happy diving.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive into more book insights and key learnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Mini Books Podcast, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We're back every Sunday at 9 a.m. with new books and more to learn from. Until next time, take care, keep learning, and keep growing. Remember, this is Mini Books Podcast.